And welcome to episode 497 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I am here by myself. It's just me. Um, yeah, just me and Colonel Blimp. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about a couple movies that I've seen recently that I haven't had a chance to talk about on the podcast. And then in part two, I'm going to be continuing our Cinematary Re-Do series. With 19, gosh, I'm so off at 1943's The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. I'm looking at it now. We did this episode back in November of 2017, episode 169. We did a series on the Archers. And we did, I'm just looking at it, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, Matter of Life and Death, Black Narcissus, The Red Shoes, Gone to Earth, and Peeping Tom. And spoiler alert for part two, the Archers are awesome. Yeah. But let's go ahead and I'm going to start into movies that I saw this week. I know we have people probably listening, just like a handful of people who want to listen to me just go on about mortality in the cemetery. I don't know. I'll get to that point at some point, possibly, maybe. I'm going to talk about movies because I kind of wanted to do that. The first movie I wanted to talk about is The Conversation. The Conversation came out in 1974. Francis Ford Coppola. They had a screening here in Charlotte. The IPH, friend of the pod, for Gene Hackman, who recently passed away. I haven't seen The Conversation. I was looking at Letterboxd. The last time I watched The Conversation, which honestly, like, I don't know, kind of a flex on me, July 4th, 2019. Which honestly, what better day to watch The Conversation than on Independence Day on July 4th? But for those who have not seen the movie, The Conversation stars Gene Hackman. He's a surveillance expert, very secretive, very paranoid. He begins to have this crisis of conscience when he believes that the couple that he just like the movie opens with this meeting between this couple and Gene Hackman and his team. Gene Hackman's character Harry Call are recording them. It's a very like intricate recording. He talks about it like in depth later. They're in this like Park Square, and you have all of these different. You have these two people with like sniper rifle sound like microphones. You have people like in the park that are like kind of trailing them and following them around. He's also one of those people who's like kind of following them around. But he records this couple. They're talking about, clearly this is kind of like somewhat of a forbidden love, something that's bordering on dangerous. And he makes this recording, and as he goes through the process, this is a movie that's so like it's fun to watch because it's so obsessed with analog. It's like a nice cleanser from like you're scrolling through your Twitter feed or playing through your phone and like playing with different AI gadgets and things like that. This is such an analog movie. It's kind of nice to like reorient yourself with that. But as he's like working on the audio to turn into the mysterious, client who's asked him to do this, he starts to kind of notice that a lot of what they have this kind of somewhat of a fear in their voice. And as he goes to like give young Harrison Ford, who's not the client, but young Harrison Ford, give him the recording, he starts to notice the people he recognizes the people in the office, in the skyscraper when he's there. And so he just becomes increasingly more and more paranoid that this couple is going to be murdered because of his recording. And it had been so long, like I said, 2019 was the last time I watched it. It had been so long since I'd watched this movie. I don't have anything controversial to say about it. 5 stars. It's an incredible movie. It's one of probably Francis Ford Coppola's best. I guess maybe the controversial thing would be like I'd rather watch The Conversation than any of the three Godfathers. I think this movie is incredible. I think this movie is really prescient and really scary. It becomes like terrifying. It enters, for those who have seen it, like it enters this almost like psycho territory where he goes to the hotel room where the couple was supposed to meet, and he believes that something's happened there because he like heard and saw it because he got the hotel room right next to them right before the meet was supposed to happen. And um like you have this like shower curtain that's blocking the shower, and like you're immediately like going to Psycho and Norman Bates, and like you're gonna tear open the shower and there's gonna be a murderer, and there's not one, and you just kind of hold in this anxiety before he flushes the toilet, and then the blood starts coming out of the toilet. It's a great shot. It's terrifying. It's really spooky. um but yeah, you also just kind of have this. I was thinking as well, like this is 74. We're in the middle of Watergate. You have this obvious. I mean, Francis Ford Coppola's like, I was writing this when I was in college. I wasn't writing this because of Watergate. And you're like, oh, I mean, whatever, happy accident, I guess. But and maybe it had me thinking though, like what we're in this kind of unprecedented era uh, with presidential administrations. This is the second term of Donald Trump as president. Um, and it seems like an era that would be like rife with thrillers to this level. Um, and it can be a little bit of like there's just something about this movie that stands the test of time because of Coppola's directing. I think there's a little bit true to that. I don't know who. I'm sure there are directors today who could kind of handle something like this. Like something like this, but for like the Trump era for sure. But I don't know. I feel there's definitely been movies I think that kind of capture that. But honestly, and I'll talk about it a little bit in part two. Like it's kind of interesting going back in time to movies and reflecting on it through that light, because it's not that it doesn't really lessen it. It's not or it doesn't lessen this time period. It kind of it is a reminder that there's been kind of seeds of this in Western, to loop in Colonel Blimp. Like there's been seeds of this in Western culture for so long. Um, Whether we didn't see them or we chose not to see them is a debate for another day. Um, but like you can kind of capture that. Carrie Call's constantly walking around San Francisco and is like feeling that people are watching him, and you have like the great shot of Harrison Ford like walking through the building, just kind of appearing behind corners and things like that, and following Harry Call, and he just kind of he finally just like falls into this paranoid mess. Uh, but yeah, it's just you kind of watched older movies and you realize that time's pretty cyclical. Um, That's all. I think that's mostly what I have for the conversation. It's available. I don't know where it's streaming necessarily, but it's available. It's on rental services. As always, like shout out to the library. Go to your local library and watch the conversation. Um, it's a great time. So you know, it's up to you. The other one I wanted to talk about was the Heroic Trio. This is I caught this. This was also in a. This was the movie that the IPH showed after Chunking Express when we did our episode. As I take a sip of wine. Apologies, that's not very good audio. Heroic Trio. I think I've talked about it before. Stars Johnny Toe, or stars Johnny Toe. It's directed by Johnny Toe. It stars Anita Mui, Michelle Yao, and Maggie Chung. I think I talked about it a little bit in relation to our Michelle Yao series a few years back. But the Heroic Trio, it came out in 1993. Um, it's honestly like the Hong Kong equivalent of like a superhero movie, except instead of like a boring Marvel movie, it's three of the most popular Hong Kong actresses at that time just killing vampires and shit like that. I don't know. They're having a hell of a time. Like, I mean, because the plot of the movie is pretty irrelevant. It's more just like the vibes and just kind of, you know, just jumping in for the ride. Um, but you're introduced to the movie. Anina Moi is married to this. I don't even know where, like, captain in the place, lead detective. I don't know what he does, but they're looking at this house. But they're also talking about these crimes that have been happening where all of these babies have been getting kidnapped. Um, Only for us to later find out that, like, there's this, like, powerful master that trained all 3 of these women at some point in time. Some of them breaking away from his clutches, others, still like, a slave to the master to a degree. And Michelle Yeoh's character is the one who's still like, she's been st- kidnapping these babies for this guy who lives like in the, it's like a Ninja Turtles type situation. He lives in the sewers. They got this whole like this whole like well lit cannibal empire just under the sewers, which brings into question what the sewer system in this part of Hong Kong was like. But um and so you end up realizing that Anita Mui's character is Wonder Woman. Yeah, Wonder Woman, which honestly is like the only Wonder Woman you should really, other than like Linda Carter, that you should respect at this point in time. Michelle Yeoh is the Invisible Woman. She is married to this scientist who like is like sequestered in this room. He's built this like invisibility cloak, and for whatever reason, it's like toxic. And he's just like, "I love you, but it's toxic, and you can't come in here." And she's like at the window, just like, "I love you," and he's like, "I love you too, but the toxins of the invisible cloak are keeping us away." And then you have Maggie Chung, who plays the thief catcher, who has the best interest of entrance of all 3 of them, where she like rolls up on a motorcycle, like in all leather, within like sunglasses and shit, and takes down these like bank robbers who have taken all these people hostage. And like she does it by like she like one of her weapons is she just has like firecrackers just a whim. She throws the firecrackers into like a trash can and like gets on top of the trash can and like rides it in to the building to then start fighting the bank robbers. Um, I'm not following the plot, but that's not really part of this movie. You're not supposed to follow the plot of the heroic trio. You're just supposed to be like, these are 3 of the top Hong Kong actresses. They're gorgeous. They're amazing. They're kicking ass. That's really the point of the movie, is you're just watching them do that. Um, there's all these like weird like levels of who's related to who. It doesn't really matter. Um, at the end, they gotta save they gotta save all the stolen babies. They gotta, but this movie is also crazy. Let me just go on into it a little bit. I think everybody should watch it. It's on the Criterion channel. Maybe it's in the Criterion collection. Um, this movie's insane. Like, think about like the Tim Burton, like a little bit of like, to make it an American comparison. It's like Tim Burton's Batman. Like, that's kind of the level of like set design and like the vibe you're getting from it. It seems like a deeply unsafe world. Um, but with like no holds bar. Like in Tim Burton's Batman, you're never gonna have a baby that is kidnapped and then like the women are fighting and kind of lose track of the baby, and then the baby like falls out of the basket and is sorry, is impaled by a nail, which is just absolutely preposterous. And it like is impaled by this nail, and then they like take it to the hospital, and the doctors are just like, it's not going to make it. I'm like, yeah, it's like a newborn baby that just got, and like you like see the nail and the blood. It's an insane movie. It's pretty crazy. I don't know if that's the selling point, and you might have turned it off at this point, but um I don't know. You can't beat the heroic trio. It's pretty fun. I need to watch. I'm gonna probably watch this weekend or something like that. I need to watch the sequel called The Executioners. Um, it's fun. It's kind of fun. Like, um, looking at all of these actresses, Anita Mui at this point is like the queen of Hong Kong, at least like with cinema. Like she's a massive music artist. That's a whole other realm that she's big in. But then she's also this like big movie star. She's in Drunken Master 2 with Jackie Chan, where she plays his stepmother, even though she's 3 years younger than him. Uh, she's in Rouge. She's in a number of other movies. Like she's the biggest star in Hong Kong at this point. Then you have Michelle Yeoh, who also kind of came up with Jackie Chan, was in Police Story 3, was in Super Cop 2. Um, had also made like a couple movies by herself, but never was like that next level. And this is kind of her next level movie. This is where, it's kind of looking at Michelle Yeoh as this other like Hong Kong action star. And then you have Maggie Chung, who I think most people, this is a very different role if you see Maggie Chung in anything else, whether it's In the Mood for Love, um 2046, Irma Vep, like anything like with like some of her Wong Kar-wai roles and things like that. This is very different. This is she's like very like boisterous. She's very like loud. She's very, and like you think of In the Mood for Love, she's like very contained and things like that. And this one, she's like just loud and like yelling stuff. And like at one point, she's like gonna shoot herself, and then like Anita Mui has to like knock the bullets out of like that are coming toward. It's like it's an insane movie. Um, but yeah, it's really fun. I don't know, honestly, like top tier. Like if you're thinking about what's Hong Kong action in like its golden age, I feel like this was one that you kind of have to go to, because you have three of the biggest stars of that era, and in this like cultural moment for cinema. And yeah, I don't know, heroic trio. I did not sell anybody on that. I think the baby thing probably was a step too far, but it's a reality of the movie. But it's on the Criterion channel. It's on the Criterion collection. Check out the heroic trio. um the last one I'm going to talk about really briefly is La Chimera. For those who watch Challengers and are like, man, that Josh O'Connor, he sure can act. Have I got another movie for you? Wildly different vibe though. This came out last year by directed by Alice Rohrwacher. I think it's like that. I messed it up, so I apologize, Alice. Um, but like Imara, it stars Josh O'Connor. He's this kind of like rumpled, like um, raggedy English archaeologist who has just gotten out of jail, and he has this group of kind of quirky nobodies to a degree who in Italy who he like joins on these grave robbing raids. And they what they do is they loot these Etruscan tombs and try to find like ancient treasures to then restore and sell off. And Josh O'Connor's character Arthur, he's like the most important part of this group because he like does the, I don't know, I'm gonna mess it up, but he like is able to like divinely find like where like the tombs are and things like that. Um, but at the same time, like there's this woman who he clearly was in love with. You meet Isabella Rossellini, who plays this older woman who like has this affinity towards Arthur because of his relationship with I think it's her granddaughter. And she always is saying that like, oh, she's going to come back, she's lost, she's going to come back. And you hear it a couple times from the other siblings and such in the family that this girl's died, and like Isabella Rossellini's character just hasn't come to terms with that. It's a very honestly, like, I'm excited to rewatch it. It's a very opaque movie. It's a very like hard to me, a little bit hard to get in. Like, it's a movie that kind of keeps you at arm's length because it always is very elusive. And I say that as not necessarily a bad thing. It's also like a fascinating movie. It's a movie that like I never constantly, it's like the plot is happening and I never know what's going to happen next. Like you're constantly on your toes. And I'm very curious to like on a rewatch watch it and see what it's like when you kind of know the path of the movie, because on the first watch you're just I could see people kind of watching this and being like, I'm a little bored. Um, because it's all, it's one of those movies where it's all like kind of happening on like in like the very like in the on the side of your eye, like, it feels like it's not like really necessarily front and center. And Arthur kind of like starts this relationship with this woman. Her name is no, it's not. Is it Italia? Yeah, it's Italia. Italia, the Italian woman, um, who works for Isabella Rossellini's character, and they kind of start this like, I mean, it's tough to call it a romance. It's as romantic, I think, as this guy's gonna get. Um, but it's really a movie that just kind of lingers with me. It kind of it's to a degree it like plays with time, and um it plays with like human memory and the difficulty to kind of grasp on these these good times, because he just feels like he's like stuck in this rut and stuck in this like pattern. And so he like looks back so fondly at what came before, and you don't really, he's not super trustworthy as a narrator, or at least as like the narrating eye, like the person whose gaze is kind of casting the movie, to really trust. Um, but he also like, there's something, he's kind of frustrating, but you also like can kind of sympathize, or at least he's somebody interesting enough to follow along with. And the ending I find so like perfect, and honestly, like I'm saying it too many times, but like fascinating. La Chimera, it's on Hulu right now, as well as Canopy. If you didn't see it, I'm mad that it took so long for me to see it, because it probably would have been in like one of my top 10 or 15 movies from last year. It was really good. Um, and you also just kind of have like this. It's a movie that feels a bit out of time. I mean, it was made last year, but it feels like something made in like the 60s or 70s or 80s, and you just kind of have like this soft pastel of the Italian countryside. Um, it's such a kind of like it's a nice spring movie to take in. But La Chimera, it's on Hulu and Canopy. Um, I can talk a bit about Cinematary. I'm doing a solo episode. The last time I looked and I did a solo episode was also like in 20, I think it was 2019. Um, it's fine. It's not my it's I'll be honest with y'all. I hope it's doing okay, but it's not my favorite. The podcast is not something, as we reflect on it, and we're closing in on 500 episodes. It's never it's tough. Like, I deal with it now. It's like it's not something that I want to say is necessarily like my thing, but it's also been such a um like important pillar in my life up to the 33 years now. This is something that I've done for over a decade, especially like with Andrew, like we've done this for over a decade now. We're close to 12 years. Um and the format that we do now, and how we're, as we kind of transition out of it, it's a little scary, because it's just kind of like, we know this works, we know people like it. But at the same time, it's been such a, as I look at, like, it kind of leads into the life and death of Colonel Blimp. Like, it's a movie where it's been a time, Cemetery's been a time where there's been so many like faces and voices and different people who have come in and out of it, and some people who come into it and kind of drift off and then come back for a little while and then drift off again. It's like this constant of me and a number of people who stay dedicated to it. Um, and it's a bit sad when it's gonna go. I don't know like what it'll be. Weird. We did this Chunking Express episode like a week or a number of days after, no, just a few days after we did the episode before, and we went like 2 or 3 weeks or so without doing an episode, and we got into that duck soup episode last week, and I felt very rusty. And so, like, with this new format, like, if we're gonna be taking like a month or two off, it's gonna be so strange to then get back into this room. There's something about like that comfort level of being able to, like, knowing what I need to accomplish, or what we need to do in an episode, and like a trust in the format. But I think that challenge is going to be something that's good and something that's going to be interesting. I'm not, I wouldn't say that like we're getting bored in the format. There's so many different ways that we could definitely there's so many different series. We talk about it all the time. Honestly, like we could just have like a running list of like 1,000 series that we would want to do. But um, I don't know. I want to do something different. It's still within this, the Cinematary brand, but like do something different with it. Um, but it's also a bit it's a bit daunting. It's a bit scary. I hope it's something that people like. Um, but also like with podcast, I'm talking now to a blank screen. I assume people are listening. I know people are listening. I see the data, but it's not a solitary environment. This is why I don't like getting on this by myself. Because it is so communal. You want to see other people like shine in different episodes, and they get really passionate and allow them to kind of like run with that. And to me, it's always been about the people. Whether it's people like kind of co-host on the podcast with me, whether it's like guests that we've had, whether it's people who have written in. That's always like what's been the best about about this for me. Um, and so now I'm a bit melancholy and blue because I'm having to do this by myself, and it's really not, to be honest, not the movie to do this with. The life and death of Colonel Blimp is really sad. um, I love that movie, but it's a really sad movie. It's a really reflective movie, and a tough movie to be like, let me tackle this by myself. Um, but I will. I'm gonna take a short break. Um, and I'll be back and we'll talk about 1943's The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp after this. And we are back with part 2 of episode 497 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our Cinematary Re-Do series with 1943's The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. And I guess, I shouldn't have said that I was alone in the first part because I'm not technically alone. Um, I have a little help from my younger self. If you could introduce the movie, young Zach.
Said it's written, directed, and produced by the Archers. The cast includes Roger Livesey, Deborah Kerr, and Anton Walbrook. The film follows Major General Clive Candy from the Boer War to the Second World War. And the film's title derives from the satirical Colonel Blimp comic strip by David Lowe, but has no connection with the story itself. The comic, they just take the name from the comic strip, and Candy kind of looks like Colonel Blimp at the beginning. You assume it was, I almost thought it was going to be like an Apocalypse Now type situation where, it'd be, but anyway. According to the directors, the idea for the film did not come from the newspaper comic, but from a scene cut from their previous film, One of Our Aircraft is Missing, in which an elderly member of the crew tells a younger one, quote, "You don't know what it's like to be old." Powell has stated that the idea was actually suggested by David Lean, then an editor, who, when removing the scene from the film, mentioned that the premise of the conversation was worthy of a film in its own right. Powell wanted Laurence Olivier, who previously appeared in their films 49th Parallel and The Volunteer, to play Clive Candy. However, the Ministry of Information refused to release Olivier, who was serving in the Fleet Air Arm, from active service during World War II. In 1970, Powell recalled the extraordinary discussions he and Pressburger had with the Ministry of Information. Quote, "They said, 'We don't think you should make this film.' We replied, 'Go and fuck yourself.' They said, 'All right, but you can't have Laurence Olivier. You're going to stop us from making it? Oh no, we're not going to stop you. After all, this is a democracy. But we advise you not to make it, and you can't have Laurence Olivier because he's in the Fleet Air Arm, and we're not going to release him to play your Colonel Blimp.'" Further problems were caused by Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who, prompted by objections from James Grigg, his Secretary of State for War, sent a memo suggesting the production be stopped. Grigg warned that the public's belief in the, quote, "Blimp conception of the army officer would be given, quote, a new lease of life." After Ministry of Information and War Office officials had reviewed a rough cut of the film, objections were withdrawn in May of 1943. Churchill's disapproval, though, remained, however, and his insistence on an export ban, much exploited in advertising by British distributors, remained in place until August of that year. At about the time of the premiere, Churchill was said to have confronted Anton Walbrook backstage at the West End Theater, where he was appearing in the play Watch on the Rhine. Churchill said, "What's this film supposed to mean? I suppose you regard it as good pop propaganda for Britain." Walbrook reportedly replied that only the English, quote, would have had the courage in the midst of the war to tell the people such unvarnished truth. Churchill remained unconvinced. Although the film is strongly pro-British, it is a satire on the British Army, especially its leadership. It suggests that Britain faced the option of following traditional notions of honorable warfare or to, quote, fight dirty in the face of such an evil enemy as Nazi Germany. There is also a certain similarity between Candy and Churchill, and some historians have suggested that Churchill may have wanted the production stopped because he had mistaken the film for a parody of himself, since he himself had served in the Boer War and the First World War. Michael Powell once said of the movie that it is, quote, a 100% British film, but it's photographed by a Frenchman. It's written by a Hungarian. The musical score is by a German Jew. The director was English. The man who did the costumes was a Czech. In other words, it was the kind of film that I've always wanted to work on, with a mixed crew of every nationality. No frontiers of any kind. At other times, he also pointed out that the designer was German and the leads included Austrian and Scottish actors. The military advisor for the film was Lieutenant General Sir Douglas Brownrigg, whose own career was rather similar to Candy's, as he had served with distinction in the First World War, was retired after Dunkirk, and then took a senior role in the Home Guard. The film was heavily attacked on release, mainly because of the sympathetic presentation of a German officer, albeit an anti-Nazi one, who is more down-to-earth and realistic than the central British character. The film provoked an extremist pamphlet, The Shame and Disgrace of Colonel Blimp, by right-wing sociologist E.W. and M.M. Robson. In the pamphlet, they called it a highly elaborate, flashy, flabby, and costly film, the most disgraceful production that has ever emanated from a British studio. The film was the fourth most popular movie at the British box office in 1943. In 2002, Roger Ebert said, "Rarely does a film give us such a nuanced view of the whole span of a man's life. It is said that the child is father to the man. Colonel Blimp makes poetry out of what the old know, but the young do not guess. The man contains both the father and the child." Scorsese, at the time of the re-release, said, "Every time I revisit the life and death of Colonel Blimp, it grows, it becomes richer with every passing interval of time, and that's what the film is about, after all. It seems to have become more resonant, more moving, more profound. You could say that it's the epic of an ordinary life, and what you retain from this epic is an overpowering sense of warmth and love and friendship, of shared humor and tenderness, and a lasting impression of the most eloquent sadness."
Um, do I still talk that fast? I talked so fast. That was 5 minutes, but like, just slow down. Use your words. Yes, this was. Let me look. This is like the fourth time I've watched Colonel Blimp. The first time I watched it was for the podcast for 169. The second time I just watched it because I really liked it. And then the third time I watched it, which I think was probably the best time I've had watching it, was I watched it on like New Year's Eve. I think it was like 21 or something. Great New Year's Eve movie. Excellent New Year's Eve movie. If you're ever looking for one. If you don't want to do Phantom Thread for the 50th time, definitely do Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. I think Scorsese's true. It definitely grows, and like it's good to revisit it at different points in life. And that was what was interesting about listening to episode 169 from 2017. To see what it was. It was me and Lydia talking about it. Here's one of the things I said.
The way they manipulate time in this movie is very unique to other movies, because by the end of it, I think the sadness that we talked about at the beginning, that you have for Candy is more, he kind of has this revelation that he's lived, but he at the same time he hasn't lived. It's like he has these moments that he in these ideals that he latches onto and he holds so dear, but the world's constantly changing around him and he's having to loosen those and kind of the world saying that he has to kind of drop those in order to move on.
Yeah, I
um
think that
and so I think that's what makes those memories so effective, is because it kind of just glazes over and passes on what you would assume would be such the focal point.
I mean, kinda. I don't know. You're a little off on that. What's 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 interesting about the movie is that when it comes to those moments is that it doesn't. You would think like that's what's magical about the movie. You would think it would linger on this duel between him and Theo. You would think it would like labor on about any of his war exploits, whether it was the Boer War, whether it was World War One, even like in the Home Guard. Like you would assume that you would get those moments. Those are the most cinematic moments. But that's not the point of the movie. You also see that like those aren't like those moments are just animal heads on a wall, you know. Those are medals on a jacket. Those are, just kind of, awards left, in the dust. Like all of that stuff, he literally has a room that's just kind of like it's like my accomplishments, and it's all of these animal heads that he's shot, and it's all of these like different years and different locations where he's done it, where he's hunted. And none of that has really anything like that's not the resonant, that's not the meaningful points of life. The meaningful, the thing you spend so long in his escapade in Berlin because he meets um Edith and he meets Theo, who are the people he loves most in the world. um I think the lesson you learned from the life and death of Colonel Blimp is we all have a Deborah Kerr who we meet a new Deborah Kerr at different points in our life. um because you see three of them. But um, like watching it now, it's like, yo, no, these are the meaningful moments. The meaningful moment is not like what like the hack and slash of the duel. The meaningful moment is like not all the like military tactics, the bravery he displays in these different fights. It's you see how excited he gets when Theo arrives. Is they're like driving to his house for for the dinner when Theo's being released from the prisoner of war camp. You see like the absolute stun and hurt, and like it's just punishing when Theo when he like doesn't reciprocate and doesn't respond to him and completely walks away from him when he goes and visits him at the prisoner of war camp. um like it's really beautiful, honestly. Like, Deborah Kerr's character is supposed to be kind of the love of the movie, but the love of the movie for Clive Candy is Theo. Like those two love each other. They're best friends. And like you see the way that like Clive acts with his wife, also Deborah Kerr. um and like how he acts when Theo's around, and it's sweet. Like that's the person who like sees him the most clearly in the world is Theo. And that's why he's able to, in the third act, like um I've cut him down a little bit after he's turned away at the BBC from his annual or like weekly comments on like how the war's going. I think I had more to say on that. Let me check.
In the Anton Woolbrook character, the Theo makes this point later in the film when he's talking to Candy after he's bumped from appearing on the BBC to talk about Dunkirk, I think. And he says, it's, I think Candy makes it to him as well, where it's like, when we're young, we don't know as much, but we have so much more energy. We're so much more, excited to kind of get into the brush of everything. And when we're older, we have much more understanding. We have all this knowledge, but we're not we're not wanted to use any of it. It's like you've accumulated all this experience and knowledge, and you get to this age where you're not required anymore. Nobody really wants you to use that. And yeah, that's what makes this such a sad movie, because it's just, yeah, he I think that we come at a odd angle because we're definitely on the kind of youthful side. We're on the angle where we're kind of the 1902 candy where I think that
Yeah, a
we,
lot of energy it gives up.
yeah, we lack the insight of somebody who's been doing something for so long. Um and I think that we're probably a little cocky and we think that we know things, but um yeah, I think that's what's so effective about this movie is it has this understated yet very poignant observation on life.
Yeah, you're cocky. We're cocky now. I don't know. That's. I think you get a little bit at the point, but I think overall, like it's also just like when it's less that you get older and you have all of this knowledge and this experience, and it's more that like you get older and you recognize like what you want to put your energy towards. Like when you're younger, you're just kind of you're a bit of a fire hose. You're just kind of spraying all over the place. You're trying to like define yourself. You're trying to figure out what stuff um like makes its mark with you. Like Candy's constantly like he's a military man, he's a soldier, like that's why he erupts on the producer or whatever at the BBC, because like he's insulting his it's not that he's insulting him as a person, he's insulting him as a soldier, and as a soldier that's completely like how he's defined. um he doesn't have any he struggles to have a world outside of being a soldier. He talks a little bit about it when after World War One, like he's retired. He's kind of he gets on the retired list, and he spends time with his wife and things like that. But then she dies, and without her there, kind of pulling him towards a normal life, he's pulled back into the military life because that's the only way he can process anything like on his own. Like that's it's a comfort level, but it's also that's the only way he can process anything. And so it's less like old equals wise or young equals brash. It's more just um you know when he's older, he's clearly seeing that like he finds like at like very end of the movie is kind of him finding that is him finally realizing that direction. um which is kind of the tragedy of it all. It's that you've lived this full life, you have these remarkable stories, um but like was it a full life, or was it just the room with the animal heads in it?
Those portrait moments of the life. If you wanted to have the great moments of his life like on a in a row of pictures, I think it would be tough to kind of find those. It seems like we're always seeing him in the in between, because when we pick up with him in 1902, he's just got back from the Boer War. Like it's not like we never watch him actually in battle. And the same, and then we watch him kind of have this whole thing happening in Berlin, and and then we're moving forward to World War One. And in World War One, it's the very end of the war. We catch him at the very last moment. He goes into the convent and has the meal with the nuns, and sees the Deborah Kerr, the second version of her character. And then after that we pick up and he's getting married to her, and then we pick up again and it's it's much later. We're always kind of we're in the in between of we're never in the
Yeah.
you know largest moments of his life. And I think that kind of makes it more interesting, because I think you find that's a much more effective way of telling his story and finding and being able to understand him more as a character, just because you learn more about people's character in those small moments, in those
Yeah.
in between moments, than you do in the more profound quote unquote picture moments of somebody's
Well, that's
lifetime.
where
Yeah, you're kind of there. I don't know if you're fully there. I remember this is the review I wrote on Letterboxd after watching it for the podcast, and it was the younger brash, the older not needed in between his life, um, which still holds. I didn't invent that quote. I stole that quote, but I think I think the moments we're seeing is like is again like those are the moments that are most meaningful to him. The moments with Edith, the moments with shoot, I forgot what his wife's name is. It's Deborah Kerr again. I could look on the letterbox, but it's gonna be she has three different characters. It's his moments with his wife. It's his moments with Theo as he escapes Nazi Germany and is in England and is spending time with him. Um, like that's the stuff that leaves the impression. That's not the stuff they're going to put on the tombstone. That's not the stuff that they're going to write about in the newspaper. But that's the stuff that leaves the most legacy, or at least, excuse me, not really leaves the most legacy, but like leaves the largest, like leaves the most impression like on his life. Um, because you think about it, you go through these all of these other moments when his wife dies, you just see like a little newspaper clip. You don't see him doing anything with the home guard. You just see these magazine covers and these magazine stories that they've done these stories about him. There's so many moments that Powell and Pressburger use transition between one part to the next part using um, you know media, but like also just like kind of much more traditional announcements and accolades and things like that. Um, but those aren't the parts that it's kind of one of those like on his deathbed, like he at the end of at the on his deathbed he's not going to be talking about his accomplishments in World War I or like the scraps in the Boer War and like these places that he's traveled to hunt these animals. It's his rosebud's going to probably be Deborah Kerr, but also Theo and Johnny, who's the third Deborah Kerr that we run into. Like those, like the moments with them, that's going to be kind of the rosebud at the end of this movie. It's not going to be any of that other stuff. And like to me, that's the tragedy of it. Is it's you know we work and work and work and work, and we you know we push ourselves and kill ourselves to like do these jobs, and we want to do them well. And but at the lasting impact, it less matters what the lasting impact is broadly, but it's just like what are you kind of left with? um I don't think I'm gonna have this like deep legacy because of Cinematary, because of the episodes we covered, or that we like really hit on stuff or things like that. It's gonna be the people I've met. I've known Andrew now for close to 12 years. Like he's become one of my best friends. That relationship is much more, you know, has much more power than um the legacy of the podcast. I've gotten to know folks like Michael and Grace more, and meeting them and being able to you know be a part of their lives for however long is great, and is the stuff that I kind of I hope that I'll remember more of. The different I think back when I think back on Cemetery, it's less like episodes and specific points I made about movies and or different things we did in an episode that we found to be different or substantial. It's more just like I remember the different people who have joined on. It's been fun doing this series because I've been listening back and hearing voices that I haven't heard in a long time. Um, and a lot of these folks, they're on maybe a handful of episodes. There's people who have been on for a number of years, and then next thing we know, they're like this, they're gone. It's a bit why I'm here by myself tonight. It's people are we've gotten more busy. People have continued to get more busy. Um, I appreciate the time that everybody takes for these episodes, but at the same time, it's tough to juggle so much and then put in the amount of effort that you want to put into this. The only reason I'm here, mainly because the main reason I'm here tonight is that I don't, if you're like, what's been the most impressive thing about Cinematary? It's not the movies that we've talked about. It's not, um, it's a bit about the amount of episodes, but it's more the consistency to me. Like that's been the most important thing since day one is consistency. And you can say a lot about Cinematary. We've had our ups, we've had our downs, we've had our kind of lull periods, we've had the really high points, but we've consistently been putting stuff out there. Um, and maybe that doesn't mean much. Maybe that's not, I'm not going to have consistency mailed on my, nailed to the wall like a elephant head like Clive Candy has. But it's what's allowed all of this stuff to happen. The it's kind of you flip through if we were transitioning from one point to the next point in Colonel Blimp with Cinematary, it would be kind of going through this list of episodes, but it would be more the people who the memories made with others along the way. It's going to Toronto. It's doing like the live shows. It's doing episodes um like the episode for Abbas Kiarostami's 10, where Andrew and I, because the movie takes place in a car, we got in Andrew's car and just drove around and recorded ourselves, and that was the episode. Um, it's the different guests that we met. It's those memory, just remembering the people that we've brought on the podcast, both like just in stature, but also just others that just kind of were just kind of these interesting people who we found to talk about different movies. It's it's a bit a bit the movies that we found along the way. I would say that like the way I view movies is vastly different from how I view movies. Or like how I view movies when we started the podcast is vastly different. How I view movies today, it's great to see stuff like Colonel Blimp that we that I found through the podcast. I probably I don't know if I would have ever watched this movie if not through the podcast, and it's easily probably in my like top 10 or whatever of my favorite movies ever. um it's just so rich. I talked a little bit in the 169 episode about how the Technicolor, like they are just it just feels like if you were like tell me what a movie feels like. There's something about the Powell and Pressburger movies that just feel like this is what a movie is supposed to be like. It has these rich textures. It has these like luscious you know glamorous actors and actresses. It's got something. Colonel Blimp has like this kind of swashbuckling element to it. The whole move from to like Berlin and the whole kerfuffle there, just like that's kind of the opening door for the entire thing. It's just it feels very much of like this like um rogue rebel tale that at the moment it's happening you can't really you can't really you're not even thinking about like the impact this is having, but then reflecting years later like Clive Candy does at the end of the movie, it's just like that was the most important thing that ever in my life was going there and meeting Edith and Theo, and you know Edith becoming kind of the one that got away, and like it's the way that they utilize Deborah Kerr in this movie where she just kind of keeps appearing. It's interesting, the second Deborah Kerr, the Clive Candy's wife, she technically is around when Theo appears at one time, but she never sees him, and so he never like sees her face to face. And I was thinking about it on this watch where like is she like does she actually look like that? Like the picture at the end of the movie looks like Deborah Kerr to a degree, but Theo kind of looks at it and goes, this isn't the person I necessarily see. And like I was thinking about that this woman that Clive Candy's married, she's he's less seeing her how she is and more seeing her how he wants to see her, because deep down like he's still desperately in love with Edith and with the time that they spent together in Berlin, and so he's like constantly chasing her. um and so I don't know that you don't get a long time with him and his wife, but it's almost like to a degree he's like trying to like plant have like plant her face over who this person actually is, and kind of see her as this other person that she completely isn't. um which again is just kind of there's a bit of like a sadness to that. It's like this is I'm seeing what I want to see out of this. I was unable to be with this person because I didn't realize it at the time, and so now I'm trying to like see them and other people, and those other people are losing their own agency to a degree because I'm like kind of trying to see them as this person that they're not. um and yeah, it's just I think he ends the movie. He seems well satisfied with his life, but at the same time, there's I think he realizes that he's done a lot. He's accomplished a lot. He's lived all of these moments that feel very almost storybook and surreal. You think of just you don't see him actually like doing anything in World War I really. You just see him, one, interrogating people to find Theo, and then two, like happening upon this convent, and running into this nurse who looks like Edith, this lost love that he's hasn't seen in over a decade. um the even the beginning scene that's then bookend again in the back half of the movie, it just feels like something that's I think that's kind of the appeal of the Archers, is that it kind of feels almost storybook. It has this basis in reality, but it also has this basis in almost fantasy and fable. And I think that's why I like this movie. It's very much like a fable. I talked a bit about how Winston Churchill and the British government hated this movie. This is a very, I mean, they're patriotic, but it's also like not over. It's more it's more patriotic toward like the foot soldiers and things like that. It's not very patriotic toward the leaders and decision makers of the British Army or the British government. Um, if anything, it's kind of a bit tired of them. And you know, it's a very good like semi anti-war movie. I mentioned like in the first part that it has some parallels, more just parallels where he the realization that he has to come to through the movie is that useful he was a useful person, but he was only useful in the time period when he was young, and when he was young, pretty much. Like that's when I don't know, that's when he was useful, because not because he's less when he's older, but because like just war or like culture is very like geared towards younger people, and then you hit a point and you're cast out. And it's not that you can still find a use. He's found this use in the home guard that then kind of it meets its end as well. But trying to be, it's a bit of him kind of being like a square, and trying to like go into a triangle peg. It's like there's needs for the square, but the needs for the square were 40 years ago. Now it's all triangles. And so it doesn't make the square super like unuseful and unneeded and like just kind of barren. It's just that's a point that's just like it's just kind of the time has passed for him. And now it's just kind of it's kind of like your time to rest. And he's somebody who kind of stopping to rest has never really seemed like a reality to him. And so yeah, as we like get into these last 2 episodes and then the 500th episode, it's not necessarily our time to rest, but I think it's our time to it's it's the Boer War and World War One have happened, and I think we did a great job in those, and we you know deserve what we've received in the praise and um people listening and all that stuff. I think we've done that, and so now it's kind of what's kind of our second act. We're not kind of going to rest, but we're going to kind of find a purpose for ourselves that's different than the purpose that we were doing before. um I highly recommend The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. It's on Criterion. It's on the Criterion Collection. I have the Criterion Collection copy. I think it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's one of the best too. It gets a little it gets a little like long in the tooth later in the movie, and kind of I think takes a while to hit its ending, that it probably could have shortened up a little bit, but overall it's such a wonderful ride. Um, Roger Lively is fantastic. Deborah Kerr is wonderful. Anton Walbrook is just the movie doesn't work without him. Um, he's like it doesn't work. You really don't have a scene as punishing as his interview to get into London. um as he talks, as he kind of he doesn't, that's the difference between him and Candy's life. Like the in between for Candy's life is told through animal heads and newspaper articles and magazine covers, and the in between for Theo is told, is he recollects that story. We don't see anything, we don't, or anything like that. It's very, it's imbued in him, and it's personal to him, and it's like lived through him, and that's why he recounts it in that speech. And we don't have like a kind of sped up montage of his life. It's a very melancholy movie, but I love it. All right. We got to spin some names, but let me also do the whole Patreon thing. Thank you for listening to this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Instagram at Cinematary, where we post we post about the movies. I don't know. Where we we'll have posts for these movies, but it's definitely going to be something you want to listen to, or you not to listen to, you want to engage with once we get closer to the 500th episode. I didn't mention it at the top, and I apologize. Andrew's not here to remind me. But the 500th episode is going to be at Knoxville Central Cinema. It'll be on May 3rd at 8 p.m. I'll wait for others to be here. We have a movie, but I'll wait for the others to be here to announce that. But yeah, if you're in the Knoxville area, please show up. We're going to have a real good time. And then if you'd like to support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/cinematary. Thank you so much to our patrons, Cam, Ron Hayes, Tanner Huskins, Teresa Marsathi, and Tyler Chandler. We appreciate your patronage. All right, let me get the wheel. So what we have left is we have Mulholland Drive and we have Stagecoach. I'm going to guess Mulholland Drive, but let's see what it says. Oh, I was right. All right, 498 is going to be Mulholland Drive. That's going to be an interesting one. We have not talked about it on the podcast. The only time we talked about it was when we did our drunk episode for our 200th episode, and so I drunkenly tried to explain Mulholland Drive to everybody. So that'll be an interesting one to re-listen to. I might have to re-listen to that whole episode because it was something. But thank you guys for listening. Hope I didn't bore you and ramble too much. And we'll see you next time for Mulholland Drive.